At 0530 on December 17, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel David Pergrin stood in the frozen command post at Malmedy, Belgium, watching radio operators track a mechanized column that had just broken through the American front line 8 miles to the east. He was 26 years old, had been commanding the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion for 8 months, and had zero experience stopping a panzer spearhead. The Germans had unleashed Kampfgruppe paper, 5,000 Waffen-SS soldiers and 117 tanks, including 45 Tiger IIs, under the command of Joachim Paper. Their mission was simple: punch through to Antwerp, cut the Allied armies in half, and win the war. Pergrin commanded 600 combat engineers. Not infantry, not tank crews, engineers. Men trained to build bridges and clear minefields. They carried rifles and grenades, but their primary weapons were C4 explosives, detonator wire, and technical expertise. The German breakthrough had caught First Army completely off guard. Infantry divisions were retreating in chaos. Armored units were scrambling to regroup. Nobody was in position to stop Paper except Pergrin and his engineers. The numbers were brutal. First Army had lost 2,300 men in the first 6 hours of the German offensive. The 99th Infantry Division was being torn apart at Elsenborn Ridge. The 106th Infantry Division had ceased to exist as a fighting force. Entire battalions were surrendering or fleeing west. Roads were clogged with retreating Americans trying to escape the advancing panzer columns. Pergrin received his orders at 0615. Establish roadblocks south and east of Malmedy. Defend the town. Delay Kampfgruppe paper. No reinforcements available. No heavy weapons. No tanks, just 600 engineers with small arms and whatever explosives they could gather. The German advance was moving faster than anyone had predicted. Paper had already captured Hansfeld at dawn, seized fuel from American depots, and captured vehicles and weapons. His lead elements were racing west along narrow forest roads toward 3 critical bridges, Amblev, Trois-Ponts, and Neufmoulin. If Paper secured those crossings, his Tigers would break into open country. There would be nothing between him and the Meuse River, and nothing between the Meuse and Antwerp. Pergrin studied the map. Terrain was his only advantage. The Ardennes was heavily forested, with steep hills, narrow roads, and rivers cutting through deep valleys. The Germans needed bridges, every bridge. If the bridges remained intact, Paper would race through. If they were destroyed, his entire Kampfgruppe would stall. Pergrin made his decision. They would destroy every bridge before the Germans reached it. Not after the panzers arrived. Not during a firefight. Before, they would watch for the German columns, calculate timing, wire the charges, wait until the last possible moment, and then destroy the crossings. It was effectively a suicide mission. Engineers working under fire were easy targets, exposed on bridges, clearly visible to German gunners. One mistake in timing and the panzers would capture the bridge intact. One moment of hesitation and the engineers would be overrun. The demolition teams would be standing on the bridges when 5-ton Tigers rolled into view. Other officers questioned the plan. Some called it reckless. Others suggested falling back to defensive positions farther west. Let the infantry handle Paper. Let the armored divisions counterattack. Engineers were not supposed to fight mechanized SS columns. Engineers were supposed to support infantry operations, build bridges, not blow them up in the face of advancing Tigers. Pergrin ignored the criticism. His battalion had trained for bridge demolition. They understood explosives. They knew structural weaknesses. They could calculate exactly where to place charges to drop a span. The only question was whether they had the nerve to stand their ground while German tanks approached. The first test came at Haibemont, a small stone bridge over the Amblev River. Company C received the assignment. Lieutenant Bucky Walters commanded 23 men, carrying enough C4 to collapse the span. They maintained radio contact with forward observation posts, watching for German movement. Walters positioned his demolition team on the bridge at 0700, wired the charges to the stone supports, connected the detonators, ran the wire back to a covered position 50 yards west, and then waited. German reconnaissance vehicles appeared on the east bank at 0742, half-tracks and scout cars moving fast. These were the lead elements of Kampfgruppe paper. Behind them came the first Tigers. Walters watched through binoculars, counted vehicles, estimated distance, his hand resting on the detonator. The Germans were 400 yards away, then 300, then 200. His men asked if they should blow the bridge. Walters kept waiting. 150 yards. 100. The lead vehicle reached the bridge approach, and Walters still had not triggered the charges. The lead German half-track rolled onto the western edge of the Haibemont Bridge. Walters could see the driver's face, the SS markings on the vehicle, the machine gunner swiveling his weapon toward the American position. Walters squeezed the detonator handle. The explosion lifted the center span 6 feet into the air. Stone blocks weighing half a ton flew in every direction. The lead half-track tried to brake, but momentum carried it forward. The vehicle plunged into the gap where the bridge had been, crashing into the river 20 feet below. The second vehicle stopped and reversed. German soldiers jumped out and began firing across the river at the American position. Walters pulled his men back. They had accomplished the mission. The Haibemont Bridge was gone. Kampfgruppe paper would have to find another route. The demolition had bought First Army perhaps 30 minutes, maybe an hour if the Germans had to reconnoiter alternate crossings. Every minute mattered. Every delay gave American forces more time to establish defensive positions. But paper did not stop. His column turned south, heading for the bridges at Trois Ponts, a larger crossing, actually 2 bridges, one over the Amblève and one over the Somme. Both were critical. If paper captured them intact, he would have a direct route to the Meuse. The town of Trois Ponts was defended by a single squad of engineers, 12 men, no heavy weapons, no anti-tank guns, just rifles and whatever explosives they had managed to gather. Pergrin knew the situation at Trois Ponts was desperate. He radioed the squad leader, Sergeant Robert Billington, and told him to prepare both bridges for demolition. Wire every support. Use every pound of available C4. Destroy both spans the moment German lead elements appeared. Do not wait for orders. Do not hesitate. Billington began work at 0830. His men placed charges on the Amblève Bridge first. The structure was steel and concrete, newer construction, harder to drop than the stone bridge at Haibemont. They positioned explosive packs at critical load points, main supports, joint connections, areas where structural stress was concentrated, using twice the normal amount of C4 because there was no time to calculate precise charge placement. The Somme Bridge required different tactics. It was older construction with stone arches. They drilled holes into the keystone positions, packed the cavities with explosives, and ran detonator cord between the charges so a single trigger would initiate the entire sequence. Both bridges were ready by 0915. Billington positioned his men in buildings overlooking the crossings. He ordered them to hold fire until the bridges were down, then withdraw immediately. Do not try to defend the town. Blow the bridges and run. German tanks appeared on the eastern approach at 0938. Tigers, 4 of them. Moving in column. Behind them came half-tracks carrying SS Panzer Grenadiers. Billington waited until the lead Tiger was 30 yards from the bridge, then triggered the Amblève demolition. The blast was enormous, much larger than the Haibemont explosion. The entire center section of the bridge disintegrated. Chunks of concrete the size of automobiles crashed into the river. The Tiger stopped. Piper himself was reportedly in that lead vehicle. He climbed out, stood at the edge of the destroyed bridge, stared across the gap at the American position on the far bank. Then Piper did something unexpected. He began laughing. Not angry, not frustrated, laughing. His officers gathered around him. Piper pointed at the demolished bridge, pointed at the small group of engineers retreating through Tuopon. Then he said the words that would become famous throughout the 6th Panzer Army. Those damned engineers. Those damned engineers. The phrase spread through the German ranks within hours. Piper radioed it to division headquarters. Other commanders picked it up. By nightfall, every SS officer in the Ardennes offensive knew about the American engineers who kept blowing bridges. The engineers who were not supposed to be combat troops. The engineers who were delaying the entire northern thrust of Hitler's last offensive. But Piper was not finished. He ordered his column to turn south again, find another bridge, another crossing somewhere the Americans had not had time to wire demolitions. His intelligence officers studied maps, identified a third option, a smaller bridge at Neuf Mule, less than 3 miles from Toulon, probably undefended, probably intact. Perrin received word of Piper's movement at 1,000 hours. The German column was racing toward Neuf Mule. B Company had 1 platoon in that sector. Lieutenant John Kirkpatrick commanding. 19 men. They had explosives. They had detonators, but they did not have the Newland Bridge wired. Not yet. Kirkpatrick radioed that he needed at least 45 minutes to place charges and run wire. Piper would arrive in 30 minutes, maybe less. Perrin made the calculation. 45 minutes of work, 30 minutes until German arrival. The math did not work. Kirkpatrick would still be on that bridge setting charges when the first Tiger rolled into view. Perrin told Kirkpatrick to do it anyway. Get on that bridge. Wire the charges as fast as possible. If the Germans arrived before the work was complete, blow whatever was ready. A partially demolished bridge was better than an intact crossing. Even damage to the approach ramps would slow Piper down. Buy more time. Every minute counted. Kirkpatrick and his 19 engineers reached Newlyn at 10:15. The bridge was a simple steel truss span over the Liane Creek. Narrower than the crossings at Abiamiament and Tuapan, but still capable of supporting Tiger tanks. They unloaded C4 from their truck, grabbed wire spools, ran onto the bridge, and started working. The demolition required precision even under time pressure. Bridge trusses were complex structures. Blow the wrong members and the span might stay up. Waste explosives on non-critical points, and the bridge would sag but remain passable. Kirkpatrick directed his men to the main load-bearing joints. The connection points where vertical and diagonal members met the lower chord. Those were the weak spots. Destroy those joints and the entire center span would collapse. They worked in teams of 3. 1 man placing charges, 1 man securing them with wire, 1 man running detonator cord between positions. No talking, just hand signals and urgent movement. They could hear German vehicles approaching, engine noise echoing through the forest, growing louder, coming from the northeast along the only road that led to this crossing. By 10:30, they had placed 8 charges. Not enough. A proper demolition of this bridge required at least 16, but 8 might work if positioned correctly. Kirkpatrick made the decision. Connect what they had. Get off the bridge. Prepare to blow it. The moment Germans appeared, his men were running wire back to the detonation position when the first German vehicle came into view. Invasion, German scout car, for SS soldiers inside, moving fast. The vehicle was 300 yards away when Kirkpatrick's forward observer spotted it. 200 yards, Kirkpatrick's men were still connecting wire, still securing the detonator to the circuit. The Invasion was 100 yards away. 50, the German driver saw Americans on the bridge. Started to brake. Kirkpatrick triggered the charges. 6 of the 8 explosions fired. 2 charges failed. The bridge lifted. Twisted. The center section dropped 10 feet but did not completely collapse. The structure was damaged, dangerously unstable, but technically still standing. The Invasion stopped, reversed, disappeared back into the forest. Kirkpatrick reported the partial success to Perrin. Bridge severely damaged but possibly passable. To German engineers with bridging equipment. Perrin understood the implication. Piper would send his Pioneer Company forward. They would assess the damage, maybe attempt repairs, maybe throw a temporary span across the gap. The delay would be hours instead of minutes, but it was still a delay, and delays were killing the German offensive. By noon on December 17, Piper had traveled less than 15 miles. The operational plan called for 60 miles on the first day. Piper was 45. Knee behind schedule, 3 demolished bridges, multiple detours, constant rerouting, and everywhere he turned, another group of American engineers was setting up roadblocks or wiring another crossing for demolition. Perrin repositioned his companies. A company moved to Stavo, another critical bridge over the Amblev. German intelligence indicated Piper would attempt that crossing next. C Company established positions at Verbemont, a road junction that controlled access to 3 separate routes west. B Company remained mobile, ready to respond wherever the German column appeared next. The casualties were mounting, not from direct combat. From the work itself, engineers under fire, exposed positions, German artillery finding their locations. Staff Sergeant Paul Hinkle was killed, placing charges on a bridge approach at Stavo. Corporal Michael Chen was wounded by German machine gun fire while cutting detonator wire. Private First Class Anthony Delgado drowned when he fell from a damaged bridge into the Amblev River while attempting to recover and used explosives. But the mission continued. Every bridge Piper needed was either destroyed or prepared for demolition. Every road junction was blocked or mined. Every fuel depot in his path was burned or evacuated. The 291st Engineer Combat Battalion was fighting a defensive action without firing more than a few dozen rifle shots. Their weapons were explosives and timing and technical knowledge, and it was working. Piper radioed 6th Panzer Army headquarters at 1,300 hours. Requested updated intelligence on American positions. Requested air reconnaissance to identify intact bridges. Requested permission to break radio silence and coordinate with other comp group advancing on parallel routes. His tone was professional, but his frustration was clear. The engineer battalion was destroying his timetable. His fuel situation was becoming critical, and he still had not reached the Meuse. But Perrin faced a different problem. His explosives were running out. The battalion had started December 17 with approximately 4,000 pounds of C4. By midday, they had used more than half. Additional supplies were being trucked forward from 1st Army depots, but those convoys were caught in the same traffic jams created by retreating American units. Perrin calculated he had enough demolitions for perhaps 6 more bridges, maybe 8 if his men were conservative with charge placement. After that, the 291st would have nothing left to blow. Perrin requested emergency resupply at 1,400 hours. 1st Army acknowledged but could not guarantee delivery time. The roads behind American lines were chaos. Supply trucks mixed with retreating infantry. Ambulances carrying wounded. Headquarters units evacuating. Artillery batteries repositioning. Nobody could move fast. Traffic was gridlocked for miles, so Perrin improvised. He ordered his men to scavenge explosives from abandoned positions. Minefields left by retreating units. Demo charges prepared by other engineer battalions, unexploded German ordnance if they could safely recover it, anything that could bring down a bridge. His supply sergeant reported finding 200 pounds of TNT at an abandoned ammunition dump near Malady. Another company located 300 pounds of composition explosive at a former forward command post. It was enough for 3 more bridges, maybe 4. Then the 291st would be out of options. The German advance continued. Piper captured Stavelo at 16:30 despite American attempts to hold the town. The bridge demolition team had wired the crossing but hesitated to blow it while American vehicles were still trying to escape across the span. By the time they triggered the charges, German infantry was already on the western bank. The explosion killed 11 SS soldiers, but failed to completely destroy the bridge. German engineers assessed the damage, reported it was reparable within 2 hours. Piper now had his crossing. His Tigers moved into Stavelot, refueled from captured American dumps, continued west toward Tuapan for a second attempt at that location, but this time Piper split. His force sent a detachment north to Francoshaw, another south toward Juan. 3 separate thrusts, testing American defenses, looking for the weak point. Perrin tracked all 3 columns. His observation posts reported German movement, radioed positions, and estimated strength. But the 291st was stretched thin. 600 men covering dozens of potential crossing sites across a 20-mile front. They could not be everywhere. Could not wire every bridge. Could not stop every German probe. At Frank, a small bridge over the old Rouge stream was captured intact. Piper's northern detachment secured it before American engineers arrived. The Germans immediately pushed reconnaissance vehicles across, sent scout patrols west to identify the next objective. Within 30 minutes, they had advanced 2 miles, encountered no resistance, radioed back that the route was clear, but the route was not clear. It was mined. Perrin had ordered defensive minefields placed along every likely axis of German advance. His men had worked through the previous night, planting anti-tank mines at road junctions and narrow passages. The German scouts triggered the first mine at 1,700 hours. A Tiger hit a second mine 3 minutes later. The explosions disabled both vehicles, blocked the road. Piper's northern detachment stalled. The southern thrust toward Vanna encountered a different problem. No bridges. The engineers had already demolished every crossing along that route. The Germans reached the Lian Creek and found nothing but destroyed spans and impassable gaps. They tried to ford the creek, but the banks were too steep, the water too deep. Tiger tanks could not cross. Piper's southern detachment was stuck. That left only the main column, still pushing west from Stavelot, still trying to reach Tuapan, still trying to break through to open country. They advanced 4 before encountering the next American roadblock. A company of the 291st 40 engineers with rifles and 2 Browning machine guns. No anti-tank weapons, no artillery support, just small arms and discipline. The German lead elements attacked at 1,800 hours. Half-tracks. Carrying Panzer Grenadiers. They expected the Americans to retreat, expected token resistance, then withdrawal. But a company held position, opened fire at 300 yards, cut down the first wave of German infantry, disabled 2 half-tracks with concentrated machine gun fire, forced the Germans to deploy and take cover. The firefight lasted 17 minutes. The Germans brought up more infantry. Started flanking movements. A company commander ordered withdrawal before his position was overrun. His men pulled back to a secondary position 500 yards west, left behind a prepared demolition on the road itself, not a bridge, just a section of highway. 1,500 pounds of explosives buried under the pavement. The Germans advanced cautiously, cleared the American position, began moving vehicles forward. A Tiger rolled over the buried demolition. The crew never knew what hit them. The explosion threw the 60-ton tank sideways off the road. Destroyed the turret, killed the entire crew. The blast crater was 15 feet deep and 30 feet wide, completely impassable. Piper was now 12 hours into his offensive. He had advanced 22 miles. The operational plan called for 70 miles by this point. He was 48 miles behind schedule. His fuel was critically low. His infantry had taken casualties. 3 of his Tigers were disabled or destroyed. And everywhere he turned, There were more American engineers, more demolished bridges, more roadblocks, more delays. At 1900 hours, Piper received new orders from 6th Panzer Army: continue the advance, bypass obstacles where possible, maintain momentum, reach the Meuse within 24 hours. The entire northern offensive depended on CONF group of Piper breaking through. But Piper could not maintain momentum. Not with every bridge destroyed, not with American engineers contesting every mile. He made the decision to halt for the night, consolidate his scattered columns, reassess the situation. His men were exhausted. 20 hours of continuous movement, combat delays. They needed rest, fuel, ammunition resupply. The Germans established defensive positions around Stabilo, set up command posts, posted guards, settled in for a few hours of sleep. They assumed the Americans would use the darkness to withdraw farther west, assumed the morning would bring easier progress. They were wrong. Perrin used the night for preparation. His companies moved into new positions while the Germans rested, wired more bridges, planted more mines, established observation posts overlooking every route Piper might use at dawn. The engineers worked in darkness, no lights, no noise, just silent movement and careful placement of explosives. They were running on adrenaline and coffee and the knowledge that thousands of American lives depended on them buying more time. At 2,200 hours, Perrin received his first resupply convoy, 2 trucks carrying explosives from 1st Army depots, 1,800 lb of C4, 600 pounds of TNT, enough demolitions for perhaps 10 more bridges. His supply sergeant distributed the material immediately, sent runners to each company position with fresh explosives, told them to wire every remaining crossing within their sector. The casualty reports continued through the night. Sergeant William Foster killed by German sniper fire while observing enemy positions near Stavo. Private Robert Yamamoto wounded when his jeep hit a mine on a darkened road. Corporal James Murphy missing after his squad encountered a German patrol near Vanna. The 291st had lost 11 men killed and 37 wounded since the offensive began. Small numbers compared to infantry units, but devastating for a 600-man battalion. Perrin also received intelligence updates. Other German columns were advancing on parallel routes. The 2nd Panzer Division was pushing toward Hufvudstaden. The Panzer Layer Division was attacking near Bastonia. The entire German offensive was unfolding across a 60m front. CONF group of Piper was just one piece, but it was the most dangerous piece. The spearhead, the breakthrough force. If Piper reached the Meuse, the entire Allied position in Belgium would collapse. 1st Army headquarters wanted to know how long Perrin could hold, how long before the Germans overwhelmed his positions, how long before Piper broke through. Perrin calculated his remaining explosives, his casualties, his defensive positions. He estimated 3 more days, maybe 4 if his men were lucky and aggressive. After that, the 291st would have nothing left. No explosives, no reserves, no options. 3 days to stop the largest German offensive in the West since 1940. At 0300 on December 18, Piper resumed his advance. His column moved out from Stavilo, headed northwest toward Leglaise, another small town, another bridge, another objective. His reconnaissance reported that the Americans had not had time to fortify Leglaise. Maybe the bridge would be intact. Maybe his Tigers could finally break into open country. But C Company of the 291st was already at Leglaise. Had been there since midnight. Lieutenant Harold Parker commanding 28 engineers. They had wired the bridge, mined the approaches, set up firing positions in buildings overlooking the crossing. Parker radioed Perrin at 3:15. Reported his position ready, requested permission to engage when Germans appeared. Perrin approved, told Parker To blow the bridge at the last possible moment, extract his men safely, avoid unnecessary casualties. The mission was delay, not heroic last stands, destroy the bridge, and get out. The Germans reached Lagels at 0430. Still dark, Piper sent infantry forward to probe the American positions. The SS soldiers moved cautiously, expecting resistance. They encountered nothing. Advanced into the town center, cleared several buildings, found them abandoned, radioed back that Lagels appeared undefended. Piper ordered his Tigers forward, 3 of them, moving in column toward the bridge. The lead tank was 200 yards from the crossing when Parker opened fire. His machine guns razzed the German infantry, forced them to take cover, killed 6 men in the first burst. The Tigers accelerated, tried to reach the bridge before the Americans could react. Parker waited, let them close the distance. 100 yards, 75, 50. The explosion obliterated the bridge, sent chunks of concrete flying 300 feet. The lead Tiger stopped at the edge of the crater. The commander climbed out, surveyed the damage, realized once again that American engineers had beaten him to the objective. Piper was reportedly in that tank, watching his offensive disintegrate bridge by bridge, mile by mile. By dawn on December 18, KF Group of Piper had been stopped at 6 different locations: Havemont, Tuapan, Mulla, Stavlo, Francoon, Lagels. Every major crossing in his path was destroyed or damaged. His fuel situation was critical. His vehicles were spread across 10 miles of narrow roads. His infantry was exhausted. And he was now more than 50 miles behind his operational schedule. But Piper had one more option. One bridge the Americans might not have had time to wire. A crossing at Cho. Small village, minor route, maybe overlooked in the chaos. He ordered his column to turn south one more time. Race for Cho before the engineers arrived. Perrin had anticipated Chano. His intelligence section had mapped every possible German route, every bridge, every ford, every crossing point within 30 m. Chu was on the list. B Company received orders at 0500. Get to Chano, wire the bridge, be ready. When Piper arrived, Lieutenant Frank Ray took 1 platoon, 14 men. They loaded explosives into 2 jeeps and raced south through darkness. The roads were icy, visibility near zero. They drove without headlights to avoid German observation, navigated by map and compass and memory of the terrain. Reached Chan at 0545. The bridge was a narrow stone arch over the Amblev. Old construction, probably built in the 1800s, strong enough for Tiger tanks, but vulnerable to properly placed demolitions. Ray's men unloaded C4, moved onto the bridge, started positioning charges against the arch keystones. They worked fast. German vehicle noise was audible from the northeast. Piper's column approaching. Maybe 15 minutes away, maybe 10. They placed 6 charges, wired them in series, ran detonator cord back to a position in a stone barn 50 yards west of the bridge. Ray tested the circuit. Got a positive reading. The demolition was ready. His men took cover, waited. Watched the eastern approach through gaps in the barn walls. The first German vehicle appeared at 0612, a Panther tank, then another, then 3 more. Behind them came half-tracks, more Panthers, Tiger tanks, the entire weight of camp group of Piper rolling toward this one narrow bridge. Ray counted vehicles, radioed the information to Perrin, estimated at least 40 armored vehicles in the column, maybe more. Following. The lead Panther reached the bridge approach, slowed. The commander was scanning for threats, looking for signs of American positions. His tank inched forward onto the bridge deck. The second Panther followed. Ray kept his hand off the detonator. Let them commit. Let more vehicles move onto the span. Maximize the effect. 3 Panthers were on the bridge when re-triggered the charges. The blast was massive, much larger than previous demolitions. The entire center section of the arch collapsed. All 3 Panthers dropped into the river 30 feet straight down. The vehicles crashed onto rocks, burst into flames. Crew members who survived the fall tried to escape through hatches. Most did not make it. Piper's column stopped. German infantry dismounted. Started returning fire toward the American position. Rhea pulled his men out through the back of the barn. They moved west through forest, avoided roads, reached their rally point 2 miles away without casualties. Mission accomplished. Another bridge destroyed. Another delay inflicted on CONF group of Piper. By noon on December 18th, the situation was clear. Piper was trapped, surrounded on 3 sides by American forces. His fuel exhausted, his vehicles immobilized, his infantry pinned in defensive positions around Leglaise and Stewmont. The 82nd Airborne Division had moved into blocking positions north of his column. The 30th Infantry Division held positions to the west. The 7th Armored Division controlled routes to the south. CONF group of Piper was contained. The German offensive continued elsewhere. Other panzer divisions made progress toward Bastogne. The 2nd Panzer Division advanced to within 4 miles of the Meuse River at Dinant. But without Piper breaking through in the north, the entire operation was failing. The 6th Panzer Army had stalled. The breakthrough to Antwerp was impossible. Hitler's last offensive in the west was collapsing. Perrin received new orders at 1,500 hours. The 291st would remain in defensive positions around Malmedy, continue blocking any German attempts to reinforce Piper, continue denying river crossings. First Army was bringing up armored divisions to counterattack. Infantry reinforcements were moving into position. The engineers had bought enough time. Now the combat troops would finish the job. But the battle was not over, for the 291st German artillery began targeting Malmedy at 1,600 hours. Heavy shells, probably 150 mm guns. The bombardment persisted for 3 hours. Damaged buildings and destroyed vehicles caused casualties among rear echelon personnel. The engineers sought shelter in cellars and stone structures, waiting for the shelling to subside. 30. A reconnaissance patrol from C Company uncovered a horrifying scene: bodies strewn across a field near the Bétier crossroads. American soldiers, roughly 80 men, had all been shot. Most had their hands raised in surrender when they were executed. The massacre had occurred on December 17. Battery B of the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion had been captured by Comp Group of Piper, lined up in the open, and machine-gunned. 17 survivors were discovered hiding in a nearby cafe basement, wounded, freezing, and traumatized. They reported that SS troops had murdered their entire battery. The survivors had feigned death, waited until the Germans moved on, and then crawled to safety. Perrin immediately reported the atrocity to 1st Army headquarters, requested medical evacuation for the survivors, and requested graves registration teams for the fallen. News spread quickly through the 291st. The engineers had been executing standard combat engineering operations, blowing bridges, buying time, but now they realized they faced something beyond conventional warfare: war criminals who murdered prisoners. The motivation shifted. This was no longer simply about delaying the enemy. It was about stopping an adversary who committed atrocities. That evening, Perrin addressed his battalion, recounting what had happened at Bétier, emphasizing that the Malmedy massacre would not be forgotten. He reminded them that their work demolishing bridges had prevented Piper from reaching additional American units, had saved lives, and had halted the breakthrough. The engineers had completed their mission and would continue their duty until the Germans were defeated. On December 19, the weather cleared. American fighter bombers struck Piper's trapped column, destroying vehicles, killing SS soldiers, and cutting off any possibility of German retreat. By December 21,
Comp group of Piper was finished out of fuel, out of ammunition, surrounded.
Piper abandoned his vehicles, leading surviving men east on foot through American lines, leaving behind all Tigers, Panthers, and equipment. The most formidable German battle group in the Ardennes offensive had been neutralized by air power, artillery, attrition, and 600 combat engineers who refused to let a single bridge remain intact. The Battle of the Bulge continued through January, but the decisive outcome was clear. American forces counterattacked, pushed the Germans back, and recaptured lost ground. By late January, the front line had returned to its December 15 positions. The Germans had gained nothing and lost everything. Casualties exceeded 100,000 on both sides, equipment was destroyed, and divisions were shattered. The Wehrmacht would never launch another major offensive in the West. The 291st Engineer Combat Battalion received the Presidential Unit Citation for actions from December 17 to December 26. The award recognized outstanding performance against numerically superior forces and highlighted the bridge demolitions that stalled Comp Group Piper.
Perrin was promoted to full colonel in February.
His battalion remained in Belgium throughout the winter, building replacement bridges, clearing minefields, and maintaining supply routes. Other units nicknamed them the Bridge Killers, the engineers who stopped the SS, the battalion that saved the Ardennes.
In early March 1945, Allied armies advanced into Germany.
The Rhine River remained the last major natural barrier protecting the German heartland. Every bridge had been destroyed by retreating German forces. The river spanned 300 yards in most areas, with a swift current and steep banks.
Crossing would require major assault operations with massive casualties, except at Remagen.
On March 7, the 9th Armored Division reached Remagen and found the Ludendorff Bridge still standing.
German demolition had failed.
The bridge was weakened but intact.
American forces seized the eastern bank and established a bridgehead in Germany.
First Army recognized the strategic opportunity. Every available unit was ordered to Remagen to expand the bridgehead before German counterattacks could materialize. Thousands of soldiers and vehicles were concentrated on the single, damaged bridge. Engineers assessed the bridge and reported serious concerns.
It might collapse at any moment. First Army demanded alternatives, backup crossings, and additional bridges.
On March 8, Perrin received orders for the 291st to construct a treadway bridge across the Rhine at Remagen. The bridge had to support tanks and heavy vehicles and be operational within 48 hours before the Ludendorff Bridge failed.
Perrin reviewed specifications. The bridge required inflatable pontoons, steel treadway sections, and anchoring systems.
The river spanned 900 feet at Remagen. The bridge, including approach ramps, would stretch over 1,000 feet. It would be the longest tactical bridge built under fire in the European theater. His battalion had built many bridges in France and Belgium, but none of this magnitude, and none while exposed to artillery, Luftwaffe attacks, or active enemy interference. The 291st arrived at Remagen on March 9, beginning assembly at 8:30. Pontoons were inflated, positioned in the swift current, anchored, and connected with steel treadway sections.
Teams worked from both riverbanks. Precision was essential, any misalignment could collapse the structure. German observers on the eastern bank noted activity and began shelling at 9 o'clock.
Engineers pressed on, moving pontoons into the river and securing anchor lines despite the 7 miles per hour current, 38 degrees water, and artillery fire. By noon, 100 feet of the bridge were complete, with 800 feet remaining. German bombardments intensified with 150 mm guns, causing massive splashes and throwing engineers into the river. One direct hit killed Private Edward Morrison and wounded 5 others. Perrin ordered faster work, reinforced by the 988th and 998th Treadway Companies. Construction accelerated, multiple teams working simultaneously. By 3 o'clock on March 10, a direct hit destroyed 4 pontoons and killed 3 engineers, wounding 11 more. Perrin quickly replaced the pontoons. By dawn, 700 feet were complete, leaving 200 feet, the most exposed section. Lieutenant Harold Dawson led 15 engineers to complete the eastern end under direct observation and artillery fire. By 7 o'clock, the eastern bank was anchored. Final connection required aligning floating sections in mid-river. Any misalignment could collapse the bridge.
Teams worked from both directions, fighting current and artillery. At 10 o'clock, the final section was connected, 1,320 feet of floating bridge across the Rhine, built in 32 hours under continuous fire, the longest tactical bridge constructed during World War II. First Army immediately began moving vehicles and troops across. By 1500 hours on March 17, the Ludendorff Bridge collapsed as predicted, killing 28 engineers repairing it and injuring 93 more. By then, the Treadway Bridge and 2 additional pontoon bridges carried all traffic, securing the Remagen bridgehead. Over 125,000 American troops crossed into Germany, enabling First Army to penetrate the Ruhr industrial region and capture hundreds of thousands of German troops. The war in Europe ended 8 weeks later. The 291st Engineer Combat Battalion built 73 bridges during the war, 19 under fire, cleared 7,000 mines, demolished 6 bridges to halt German advances, lost 8 men killed in action, and 93 wounded. Out of 600 who served, it was the most decorated combat engineer battalion in the European theater. Perrin returned to civilian life in 1945 as a railroad executive for Pennsylvania Railroad, later Penn Central, retiring as vice president and chief engineer. He published his memoir, First Across the Rhine, in 1989, documenting the battalion's role in stopping Kampfgruppe and building the Remagen Bridge. The book became required reading at the Army Engineer School. Colonel David Perrin passed away on April 7, 2012, 3 months before his 95th birthday. He was buried with full military honors. Perrin's legacy lives on in every combat engineer who understands that sometimes the most important weapon is not a rifle, but timing, technical knowledge, and the courage to stand your ground when tanks are advancing. The bridge at Remagen is gone, but the Ludendorff Towers remain as a museum. Inside are photographs of the 291st constructing the Treadway Bridge, documents from the Battle of the Bulge, and Perrin's Silver Star, Purple Heart, and Presidential Unit Citation. Visitors can stand where American engineers worked under fire, view the river they crossed, and comprehend what 600 men accomplished in December 1944 and March 1945. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every day. Stories of engineers who saved lives through explosives, timing, and bravery. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the globe. You are not just a viewer, you are part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for ensuring Colonel Perrin and the 291st don't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.